Today we're going to talk about Buncombe County's Nuisance Court, and this is a particular program in Buncombe County that is really meant to address nonviolent misdemeanor charges, nonviolent and non-traffic misdemeanor charges. So charges such as larceny, shoplifting, underage drinking, possession of misdemeanor drugs, possession of marijuana. There are other charges that could go through the nuisance court process, but typically it's nonviolent, non-traffic misdemeanor offenses. The nuisance court is basically a court where the charges are ultimately dismissed upon completion of community service and potentially a drug or alcohol assessment and treatment. A lot of times it'll just be community service, but there can be other items required. There is no case in Buncombe County that is originally set to the nuisance court. So in order to get your case into the nuisance court, there has to be a request made to the gatekeeper of nuisance court, but whatever the original court date was on your citation, that very likely is not going to be set to nuisance court. It's always going to be moved into nuisance court per your request or per the request of your attorney. If you successfully complete nuisance court, you're typically going to have just 2 nuisance court dates. At the first nuisance court date, there will be an agreement entered between you and the state for you to do certain items in order to have the charge dismissed. So typically it's just going to be community service, generally somewhere between 20 and 50 hours of community service. There are certain times when a drug assessment or an alcohol assessment and treatment might be required. It's typically just going to be community service. You're generally going to go in front of the presiding district court judge. You're going to originally plead guilty to the offense charged. The state and the judge will allow you to withdraw your guilty plea and dismiss the charge if you actually complete the community service or whatever items are required. So the case will ultimately be dismissed at the first court date. There will be an agreement entered, a guilty plea entered, and then basically you typically will come back about 60 days later or 2 nuisance court sessions later, and the charges will be dismissed at that point if the community service coordinator can verify that you've completed the hours required. When you come back to court at the end of that 60 days, the charge will be dismissed if you've done everything you're required to do per the agreement upon payment of the court costs, which are currently $180. Right now in nuisance court, the community service fee that is almost always required where community service is required is being waived. That's a $250 fee. So that fee, that $250, is being waived, and the person charged is only being required to pay the court costs. Potentially after the charge is dismissed, a person might be eligible for what is called an expungement, which is a permanent removal of that charge from the person's criminal record. Whether or not it's a good idea to request an expungement or a person is eligible for an expungement is really best to be determined at that particular time. But that's certainly something that could be requested in a lot of cases after a voluntary dismissal has occurred. If there's any questions about whether your case is eligible to go into nuisance court or what that process looks like in your particular situation, call an attorney. Most criminal defense attorneys are going to give a free consultation in relation to your offense. So go ahead and take advantage of that free consultation and get on your way to having the charges dismissed.